Hey, I'm Allison from Learning at the Primary Pond. I'm a literacy specialist and I'm so excited for the topic of our video because the topic for this video actually comes from my favorite chapter of my book, the Phonics Playbook, and it is all about how to teach phonics to English language learners. If you've ever felt unsure about how to make phonics really click for those kids whose first language is not English, then this video is for you. Even if you don't have a ton of English language learners that you're working with, this will make a big difference in your thinking of how to really get them to learn phonics so that they can read and spell. Before we dive into our video, if you haven't subscribed yet, I would love for you to do that now and then hit the little bell so that you don't miss out on any of the brand new videos that I post about teaching literacy. First, let's chat a little bit about why phonics instruction matters so much for English language learners. Now, you might wonder, okay, well, these students have language needs. Is the same type of phonics instruction, like that explicit instruction where we're teaching the relationships between letters and sounds, whether it's the k sound for the letter C or the OA, spelling O, like in the word boat, any of that type of stuff. Is it still like, do we still have to do that with our English language learners? And the answer is yes. All of the same practices that we use for science of reading-based structured literacy with students who already speak English, those are still going to apply for our English language learners, but we want to apply them with some modifications and some supports, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about in this video. So first and foremost, we want to understand where our students are coming from, because you can have English language learners who have been in school for multiple years and their conversational English with other students is great, and they even seem like they follow along a lot of the time when you're doing academic stuff, but there could still be gaps. So it might appear that they're very strong in English, but that academic language, to my knowledge, the research is still stating that it takes 4 to 7 years to develop. So that's a big gap that kind of has to be filled. And so there might be things that they're not following along with in instruction that you're not aware of. On the other hand, you might have a newcomer who really doesn't speak much English at all. So like any students, English language learners come to us with a range of needs. And a couple of things that we can look at are their expressive language skills and their receptive language skills. Now you might have, they might have given you some data on like a screener that they've taken or something called the access test, which is by WIDA and can give you information on your students' development in the English language. And so you might have some data, but it also might just be something where you're kind of observing them and observing them not just conversationally, but like doing academic tasks, right? Because academic English is more challenging, like talking about the vowels in words. That's more challenging than just playground. They're playing tag and they're talking with their friends, right? So we want to look at their receptive language, meaning how much can they understand? How much can they read and understand? So receptive language, and also we want to look at their expressive language. How much can they say? That's their speaking, that's their writing. Expressive language skills are typically more challenging to learn than receptive language skills because they're just, they're like sentence structure. They have to come up with sentences to say or write, and those tend to be a little bit more challenging. So understanding receptive versus expressive is key, and we can use different strategies to support students in both of those areas. And as we're thinking about how to support kids, you might be tempted not to want to make stuff too easy. And that makes sense, right? We absolutely want to challenge our students and we want to always be observing them, like, where is their edge? Where can I help them, notice where they're at here and just take them to the next level? We want to be doing that with all of our kids, right? But we have to think about the cognitive load that English language learners have to deal with as they're doing things in school. Let's say you have a new phonics activity that's practicing a new phonics skill. You teach all of your students how to do the new phonics activity. They're also learning the new phonics skill. That can be challenging in itself if you've got 2 new things going on. But then when you add on top of it that you have students that are trying to master English, that lends itself to even more like cognitive overload. Like there's just a lot going on that kids need to think about when there's a new activity, when there is a new skill that they're learning and they're trying to work on English. So we have to ask ourselves, how do we reduce that cognitive load? Well, maybe we use activities that are familiar, right? Maybe we, think about like how many new skills we're introducing because they also have that academic language demand. Maybe we make sure that we're teaching them specific words like vowel. Even though we've talked about it before, maybe our English language learners haven't gotten it yet. So just thinking about what we're asking of our students and trying to lighten the load, especially of our English language learners, so that they can be successful, is going to be key. And there, of course, are small things that you can do that aren't necessarily specifically related to phonics, like checking in. Okay, what did I just ask you to do? What are you supposed to do right now? So that they're following along, right? Making sure that you're modeling. Now, something that I used to do when I was earlier on in my teaching career is my modeling, what I thought was modeling, was actually more of like guided practice, because I was doing things and I was asking the kids questions and getting them to participate. Now, getting kids to participate and asking them questions is not a bad thing. But like, let's say, for example, I'm trying to get them to break up compound words, right? And maybe I have the word like catnip, and that's catnip put together. And so instead of asking them, oh, where could I break up this word? What should I do? I just show them, hey, I'm gonna look for the vowels, circle the vowels. I'm gonna underline the consonants between the vowels, the T and the N, and then I'm gonna break it up between the two consonants like this. So obviously you'd be demonstrating this with a word on the board. Modeling is all about show and tell. Make sure you have those clear modeling sections of your lesson so that kids can see visually, especially for our English language learners, and hear you talk through what they're supposed to be doing. Do not skip that modeling piece. It's essential for all kids, but especially for our English language learners. And then just checking in with them throughout the lesson, paying a little more attention. Are they getting it? Are they following along? Maybe you have a partner that helps them. These are all things that can help phonics, during your phonics instruction and beyond. Okay, next we're gonna talk about specific supports that you can give kids during phonics time to help them with their receptive language. So that's language they're understanding. It could be taken in via listening. It could be something that they're reading, receptive language. Okay, so one of the most powerful things we can do, and technically you can do this outside of your phonics instruction too, but is to keep your language simple and direct. Think about when you're giving instructions, when you're introducing a new concept, think about what you're going to say ahead of time and say it in as few words as possible. Avoid idioms or those expressions that might be a little bit obtuse to students, like they just are not going to understand them, right? Just be very direct and be very concise. You can also pause a little bit between your sentences as you're giving directions. Just give them a second to process. Another thing you can do when you're explaining something or when kids are reading something is to use visuals, and that can include like physical gestures. So if you're trying to get them to understand the concept of like dusting as you're cleaning, actually model, like what does it look like to dust? Here's what I'm doing. You can break down the word into dust and ing. Just think about, okay, how are they going to read this word if it's a word that they're reading, but also how are they going to understand this word? Because English language learners are going to encounter a lot of new words that they don't know the meanings for. So as we're doing our phonics instruction, we want to take opportunities. Now, we can't spend lots of time teaching them the meaning of every word, but we need to pull out those words that we think like, they're probably not going to know what this means. And maybe we pull up something on the iPad or our computer and just show them a quick picture. Maybe we act it out. Maybe we have them act it out. Even though we're doing phonics and learning, reading and spelling words, that's great, but also how do we make sure that kids are actually understanding words? And honestly, as the brain is learning new words, for all students, it's helpful and important for them to understand what the word means. That creates a better imprint, so to speak, of that word in long-term memory when kids can not only read and spell it, but also that they know what it means. So this is valuable for all students, really. Okay, so now some phonics specific stuff. Sometimes English language learners will struggle to produce some of the sounds of English. Like between English and Spanish, there are certain sounds in English, like sh, that just don't appear in most dialects of Spanish. So it's not gonna be something that their mouths can produce, okay? Now, could they learn to produce that sound? Yes, but it might not ever be at a native proficiency. But to try to help get them there, what we can do is we can talk about and show them what our mouths are doing. So with the f sound, for example, okay, top teeth are on my bottom lip, and I'm blowing air out, right? So show them, have them use a little mirror to look at their own mouths to see how their own mouth is forming the sounds, and just bring that awareness to what their mouth should look like as they're saying sounds. This can be helpful. Again, with certain sounds, they may not be able to get to like that perfect pronunciation. That's okay. As long as they can kind of recognize the sound and, understand what the words mean that they're reading, then their pronunciation does not have to be 100% perfect, right? Like that's just, it's not necessary as long as we can get to a point where it's good enough. Okay, so other things to help with receptive language. Now, when kids are reading like decodables in, your phonics practice, number one, there can definitely be some words in there that are going to be unfamiliar to kids. Sometimes decodables in general just use less common words or words that are not like super, prevalent in everyday language, simply for the fact that they're trying to get in practice on certain phonics skills. So for all students, it's helpful to do some vocabulary work, but especially for English language learners, read through the text and ask yourself, are there some words that are going to, if the kids don't understand these, that are going to interfere with them understanding the text? And if there are, teach those words ahead of time. You can't teach every word, of course, but just pick a few, briefly tell them the definition. Don't ask them if they know what it means. Don't ask them to guess. Tell them the definition. Maybe show a photo, maybe act it out real quickly, and then move on. So just think before you're teaching what words, if they don't understand what they mean, could interfere with them understanding the meaning of the text as a whole, and focus on those. You can also do more vocabulary work after they read the text. Now, on the topic of decodable text, obviously it's for decoding practice, right? If we're doing an OA, a lesson, then we might have the kids reading a book with lots of OA words, and that's great. But we also need to make sure that our kids are understanding the text. Yes, decoding, but also understanding. So with your decodables, with a group that's not an English language learner group, maybe they read the whole passage and then you discuss. But maybe for your English language learners, you have them read only half the passage, you discuss, you check in, you make sure they understand like what they were reading about, and then you have them read the rest. So breaking things down and more frequent check-ins can be really helpful in getting kids to be successful with their reading their decodable text, or any text really. And so then other things they might be reading are like word lists, right? Just make sure you pick out a couple that maybe you're gonna focus and just like work on the vocabulary more a little bit. Same thing if they're building words, although that technically is more on the expressive side. But just thinking about like, how can I infuse a little bit of vocabulary work? It doesn't have to be extensive or lengthy into phonics instruction. Phonics actually lends itself really nicely to that vocabulary work because you're working with words. Now let's talk about expressive language support. And again, this is stuff that can be used during phonics time, but a lot of this stuff can also be applied to other subject areas. Number one, when you are thinking about your lessons, you want to include as many opportunities for kids to respond orally as possible. And this is true of all students. You want them to be actively involved. Now, when we're thinking about our English language learners, it can be really helpful to pair up students strategically. So you might choose an English language learner to have a partner who is a more proficient English speaking peer so that they can use that partner and kind of lean on them as a language model. So that's one thing we can think about. And then when we're eliciting responses from our students, many times we do want them to respond in complete sentences and using the specific vocabulary like vowels, for example. That would be a vocabulary term related to phonics. But the problem is that English language learners, like they have to figure out what we're asking them, come up with their answer, and figure out how to use the sentence structure to express themselves. And some English language learners will be able to do this and some will not. So we want to watch our students, and if they need support, we can give them that support in the mode of like a sentence frame. And this can be something that you write on the board. It can be something that you give them orally. I like to do both as much as possible. But I might say like, okay, for example, if I'm asking them how many words are in the vowel, how many vowels are in the word, like we'll just use that catnip example. I might give them the sentence frame of there are blank vowels in the word catnip. So then they just have to say there are 2 vowels in the word catnip, right? They can kind of just fill in the blank. Now, as time goes on, we want to kind of remove that scaffold and challenge our kids a little bit more. We'll talk about that later. But whether kids are speaking, answering questions, or even writing, we may want to give them those support so that they can be successful with their expressive language. And we also just want to think throughout the phonics lesson, how can we get the kids responding and talking more? So frequent partner talking, instead of just calling on like one student to answer, have all the kids answer, then everybody gets practice to their partner, and then maybe call on a student to answer, right? So as much as we can integrate that kind of thing, especially helpful for English language learners, choral reading, whether it's like a couple of words or a sentence or a whole paragraph, reading along with you, reading along with their more proficient English speaking peers, that's important. Now, not every piece of reading should be done chorally. By no means is that the case. They do need to be practicing reading when they're at that level that they can, trying to read as much as they can on their own, because that's going to help them with practice too. But in the meantime, partner reading is also very good, having them repeat after you, just getting as many responses from them as possible. And then when it comes to writing, we're kind of like bridging beyond phonics, but sentence frames can help them with writing, making sure to model, making sure to talk about how you are applying your phonics learning, like that OA pattern, to your actual writing, sentence writing, paragraph writing, whatever it is that you're doing. We won't get too far into that, but because, like in phonics time, you're probably not doing all that much writing, but you might be doing a sentence dictation, or they're spelling some words. And when you're having them spell words, by the way, that's a great opportunity to use the word in a sentence to maybe show them a photograph, just pull up something online, so that they're not only practicing spelling the word, but they're also getting a little bit of information about the word's meaning. So we're giving our kids all these supports, and that's great, but something we want to be really mindful of is also taking away support. So going from giving them a sentence frame, there are blank vowels in catnip, to how many vowels are there in the word catnip, and expecting them to respond, there are 2 vowels in catnip, right? So just thinking about, okay, might they be ready for the next level? And honestly, if you try them at the next level and it's too hard, that's okay. You can always go back. You can always ask them a question, and if they don't get it, like give them a sentence frame to help them with it, right? As long as you're making sure that it's actually the language they're struggling with and not the concept, like counting vowels, for example, would be the concept in that particular academic task. So we just want to be intentional about removing support as we can to make sure that we're challenging our kids and that they are moving ahead in their English learning. Okay, so there's a lot more that I could say about supporting English language learners with phonics and beyond, but we're out of time for now. If you want to read this chapter of the Phonics Playbook, that is just one piece of this. There's so much more in here. And this book is really about, like, number 1, what are the most effective phonics routines that you can use in your classroom? Number 2, like, when do you do this? Like, what are all the schedule options that you could use? And number 3, a big focus of this book is differentiation. That's why there's a chapter specifically on supporting English learners, because this that we've been talking about today, it's all about differentiating your instruction, but you also have the added challenge of kids maybe being in your classroom that are at different levels in terms of their phonics development. How do you support all of them? Stay sane, stick to the, curriculum or program that you're supposed to be teaching. Like, how do you possibly manage all that? There are answers in this book. So it's called the Phonics Playbook. It's available on Amazon or probably Barnes & Noble. You can get it as well still. But I'll include a link in the caption for this video. Of course, let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for watching. Before you leave, it would mean so much to me if you'd hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel, and I'll see you in my next video.